What is going on, Hawks Nation? Welcome back to another edition of the HFTV podcast brought to you by Alex and Mac. We said this on our last episode, or maybe we didn't, Mac. This is our first episode since the new year started, huh?
It is definitely our first since the new year. We wished everybody a happy new year going into the new year, but now we'll say that I hope everybody did have a good and safe, happy new year. But yeah, we're into the new year, man, and it's a new year, new opportunities for the Hawks. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to your point, we wish everyone, all of our listeners, followers, a great and successful 2023, big year for all of us. So, we wish you guys the best. It's going to be an exciting year for not only us, but hopefully the Hawks as well. Obviously, we haven't had the best last few games or so, but we came out with the W last night over our win against the Sacramento Kings. So that was a great kind of rejuvenation because obviously we started the new year off with a loss, but we bounced back and hopefully we can build on this momentum and start racking up these W's. But let's dive right into it, Mac. I mean, hey, obviously the team isn't exactly where it wants to be. We are 5-10 in our last 15. Really, really bad. 5 games under 500 in that stretch. And in total, we are, what are we, 1 game under 500 now, Mac?
Dude, we're 18-20.
Oh, okay. 2 games under 500. All right. So 2 games under 500, still not the end of the world because there is a lot of time to make up some ground. And even though we're still 2 games under 500, we're not too far off from like that kind of 4 to 5, 6 spots. So hopefully we can kind of end the month of January off in a bang, and going into All-Star break, we can really turn it up a notch. So Mac, what are your thoughts about kind of the last 10 to 15 games of our guys?
Yeah, so first I did want to say prayers up to Damar Hamlin and his family. I know it's a completely different sport, but I'm sure any of our listeners are, aware of that story. So I did just want to say prayers up to Damar Hamlin and his family. But back to the Hawks. Man, I by no means am calling you out, but you've been saying it for the last like 6 episodes that, we can turn it around here soon. It's a good stretch or whatever. And like I said, not calling you out by any means, but it is one of those where it's like, come on, Hawks, like when is this going to happen? So, 5-10 in our last 15 is not acceptable. And I'll be honest, man, it's one of those points where me personally, I think a change needs to be made. That change for myself personally is Nate McMillan. I know the interim status and things like that are a little worrisome and whatnot. And I get that, the front office has a lot of respect for Nate. But me personally, man, if Tony Ressler wants to prove and Landry Fields, if they want to prove that they're serious about winning and actually want to win a championship for the city of Atlanta, I think you got to cut ties with Nate at this point. I think it's pretty clear he's not going to win this team a championship. I've said to my friends before, I think I've even said it on the podcast, he's our Mark Jackson to whoever our Steve Kerr hopefully is. That's no disrespect to Mark Jackson. He was a great coach, but you just need a little bit of a different scheme, a little bit of a different culture, a little bit of a fresh breath, something that Nate actually brought a couple years ago when LP got fired. So I don't know, man. I want to hold on to hope. I want to say, hey, let's not press the eject button yet. Let's not blow anything up yet. I certainly don't think when it comes to roster moves, we really need to do anything drastic. I do think we still have a lot of studs on our roster that, for the most part, man, I know this is something that in sports on any level you can't, use as an excuse, but we have had a lot of injuries this year. Like we haven't had a fully squad, not even half the games we played. So I do think if that's the other way around, then we have a basically fully healthy squad all year. Maybe we aren't, in this position that we're in. So I know that's not on Nate, and I understand there are certain things that I said in our last episode or one of our episodes recently. The Hawks definitely miss open looks pretty often, right? That's not on Nate. Like that's something he can do. If anything, Nate, hopefully schemed up something to actually get the open shot. Maybe it wasn't just the flow of the game that provided that. So, I said on our last episode, and I regret saying it, but I said best case scenario, it was that Nate was, the coach that led us to a championship. I don't believe that anymore. I don't. I understand that some people may feel differently, and they are perfectly entitled to that opinion. But I personally, man, I think it's time to move on from Nate McMillan. But we'll see what happens. I think we lose, another 4 out of 5, or 3 out of 4, or whatever it is, and it kind of maybe will just happen itself. But we'll see what happens, man. So what are your feelings about the Hawks' recent woes and continued woes at that?
Yeah, I'm kind of pretty much in agreement with you, Mac. Nate McMillan, really cool person, and I wish him the best in whatever he decides to do in the future. And this isn't me declaring that he's going to get fired anytime soon, because, from the rumblings that I've heard, I'm not quite sure if a move is going to be made in the near term, at least. Maybe like the closest we can see is maybe like All-Star break, but that's still another month away. So we might be stuck with Nate, or worst case scenario, we're going to ride him out for the rest of the season, because there's no other quote unquote good enough replacement for him. But Nate, there's definitely some disconnect there, right, Mac? And even though we haven't been like losing in terrible ways over the last 15 game stretch, because there are a lot of close games that we should have won. The Nets game, which again was fully on Nate. Warriors game, we came back. Lakers, we just got dominated. Pacers game, we got dominated, etc. But the biggest thing is I feel like the preparation and the lackadaisical and out of style offense that he runs is certainly not going to be conducive to winning, not only now but in the future. So it's a tough spot to be in. I've said this on one of the post game shows, but the 6 P's of life, Mac, right? Piss poor or proper planning prevents piss poor performance. And I feel like night in and night out, about 80% of the time, this team looks, at least as of the last 15, 20 games, this team looks completely unprepared. They look like they're not motivated. There's no like organized game plan going into the game, and it's just a complete head scratcher. Like, obviously we do have adults on the team, and ultimately it is up for the players to make the plays and make their shots and play defense, etc. But as the head coach, you have to prepare your guys, because that's your job. You're the leader of this team, and in the grand scheme of things, this team is still super young. All of our best players are 26 and younger, with our best players still only being 24 years old, right? So still a lot of maturity, still a lot of growth, not only for one or two individual players, but as a whole team. And I just don't know if Nate is going to be that guy. And I'm going to reference a article and story that actually came out in August of 2020, Mac. August 2020, there was a Pacers beat reporter by the Twitter handle @ThisIsJMichael. And basically, he came out with the headline, "Insider Firing Nate McMillan Means Pacers Are Attempting to Modernize Who They Are." And some of the key bullet points of why Nate McMillan was ultimately fired from Indiana back in 2020 was displeased ownership, too much ISO, bad defensive strategy, not enough emphasis on relationship building with players, 4 key players being unhappy at the time, and rejected pleas to adjust his offense. So ultimately, Nate just being hard-headed and stubborn and kind of not changing and listening to the requests of maybe his fellow coaching staff members and ultimately his players as well. And as I read this article that I just stumbled upon just like a few days ago, I thought to myself, this sounds eerily familiar to a team now in 2023. And unfortunately, that is our team, Mac. That is the Atlanta Hawks. We've seen time and time again the over exaggeration of just ISO ball, especially in crunch time late in the fourth quarter, whether it's Trey, whether it's DeJounte, bogey here and there, etc. There's just too much of that. Ball movement completely stops. The emphasis on like the mid-range and this and that BS that just isn't modern basketball in today's day and age. And obviously, some players being unhappy with the whole Trey and Nate drama that happened a few weeks ago. It's pretty much on par, exactly word for word, narrative by narrative, what's happening now. And I don't know what happened in Portland when he got fired in his last coaching job before Indiana, but I'm going to guess it's something similar too, right? And so fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And the Pacers learned, or the Trailblazers learned the hard way their first go around. Then Indiana took a shot at Nate McMillan. They learned the hard way after what he did in Portland. And now we are the victims of the third team kind of, falling to Nate McMillan and his stubborn ways. So all in all, if you guys have been following us, I've been very vocal the past couple of weeks of my, to put it nicely, just unhappiness with kind of the coaching right now. But again, at the end of the day, we're both fans. We want what's best for the team. And, if Nate can make that change, great. I'm happy for him. I'm happy for the team. I'd rather see us win than me be correct, right? I don't think Nate McMillan is going to be a guy to win us a championship. I don't even think he's going to be a guy to take us out the first round. I think the two ECF run a couple of years ago, as I said, as soon as it happened, we fired Lloyd Pierce. Any coach in that situation, with how motivated our guys were, could have took us to the ECF. It wasn't, in my personal opinion, any credit to Nate McMillan, because he really didn't do anything differently. And quite honestly, he actually ran the same offense that Lloyd Pierce ran that same year, because he didn't want to change anything up, midway through the season. And we saw how potent we were. Last year was the first time Nate decided to change the offensive scheme. We saw how we did, barely made the play-in, barely made the 8th seed. We got gentlemen swept, and now this year we're under 500 with all his talent. I mean, it's bad. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be a pessimist, Mac. I don't think this team is going to improve that much more as long as Nate McMillan is the head coach, because we're just getting out coached, out schemed, out prepared, out everything. And coaches on the opposing sidelines, they're running circles around our guys, because they're actually properly game planning against our team, reading the scouting reports, knowing who to attack, etc. And we just don't have that. And yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough couple next games. But let's just pray for the best, right?
Oh yeah, man. And Nate, like you've said it perfectly, but it's not even just some things he does. Also, these boneheaded substitutions that he'll do. I believe you mentioned one on our last episode. He did one in the Warriors game. So it's the end of the game. Big O is one of the better box outers or box outers. Yeah, I guess in the NBA. I don't know the plural version of that, but he's one of the better people out there in the NBA, and he gets taken out for the last defensive possession. Why? And of course, what do the Warriors do? They get 2 offensive boards and they score the game-winning goal. So it's just one of those where there's certain things that Nate does where, like you said, as just a basic fan watching the game, if I can see that is wrong what you're doing, and that's just objectively just dumb, for lack of a better term, like exactly. Then why? How are you one of the 30 people in the world that have this title, meaning an NBA head coach? How are you doing this, man? So I really hope it's not, what we've heard, that Nate can be kind of petty and want to burn things down from the inside. I really hope that's not true, but I can't lie, man. When things like that happen, it causes you to raise your eyebrows a little bit, So it is what it is. Like you said, I would rather be wrong about Nate and us start winning games and turning around and become a championship contending team. But just like you, man, I just don't see it happening. But we'll see what happens.
Back off that, like you made a great point with that call out. But even in the Nets game, a couple games ago, we had 2 timeouts left with about 9 seconds of game time still left. Most coaches, I'd say maybe 29 other coaches, would have called a timeout, reset, advance the ball up at half court, draw up a play, a successful play. Instead, Nate elects to not call a single timeout out of the 2 that we had remaining. It results in a scrambled possession, we're hoisting up a 3-point shot when we're only down by 1 point. Like, that is the epitome of stupidity, moronic, every other word in the dictionary. And it's frustrating, and it genuinely makes me very angry and not want to watch this team, simply because of some of the decisions that our head coach is actively making. I mean, it's just like, it's it's a slap in the face to all the other 29 head coaches in the NBA right now, saying that if Nate McMillan can basically be in the same ilk and call himself an NBA head coach, it's disrespectful to the league and to other coaches that actually deserve that. And it's mind-boggling. So, and we can go on for hours about other simple, stupid decisions that Nate has done that ultimately put this team behind. But we won't do that. But yeah, I'm a changed man, Mac. Maybe in years past, I would have, gloated about me being right, but I don't care. I pray to God that I am wrong about this team and Nate McMillan, and I hope Nate can somehow, it's a new year. I hope he can revitalize this team and our team start winning these games. But I would like nothing more to be wrong. But realistically speaking, I just don't see it happening until we make that change. So, Tony Wrestler, Nick Wrestler, Jamie Gertz, all the other owners, Grant Hill. If you guys ever happen to listen to this clip, I speak on probably 98% of the fan base that would say Nate McMillan needs to go. I even ran a poll on Twitter, and we got, thousands of votes. And I think it was an overwhelming majority. 88% said he should have been fired right after that. I think it was the Nets game. And then I think there was like 5% of people that said wait until the All-Star break, and then there was like 4% of people that said he shouldn't be fired. So maybe that was Nate McMillan on a few burners, maybe his son Jamel Hill contributing to those votes, but 88% said he should have been fired pretty much the day of. That's pretty telling. But I don't want to ruin my night. I don't want to ruin your night or all of our listeners that happen to listen to this. We won't go on Nate McMillan too much longer, but I think I'm done off the Nate McMillan train.
Oh yeah, no, we'll end our talk about Nate because, like you said, man, we could go off forever about that. And before we go into John Collins' improved play, because we got to talk about in this episode, man, the guy's been killing it lately. And I do have to say what I think why, but we'll get into that. But before we do, man, why don't you go and give a shout out to our guys at Firmament?
Yes, sir. Firmament Solutions. You guys need to check them out. Go check out their website, www.firmament, that is FIRMAMENT solutions.com. If you're ever looking to reach a physical network for the future, you're going to want the networks that are actually built to last and that can scale with technology do so. And that's exactly what Firmament Solutions is for. They're one of the industry leaders in information highway construction building. So if you're a business owner or you work in a business that could utilize these types of services, then I would highly recommend Firmament Solutions. Go check them out. They're a local company based out of Georgia, but they work all over domestically in the US. So check those guys out, www.firmamentsolutions.com. Tell them Alex and Max sent you from HawksFanTV, and they'll treat you good. So shout out to you guys, and we appreciate all of your hard work.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We love our guys at Firmament. Check them out, guys. Promise you won't be disappointed. So yeah, man, like I said right before that, it's hard not to talk about the Hawks' recent play and not talk about John Collins' improved play recently. The guy has been putting up some monster numbers, and I'll say what I think about it, and then I guess I'll let you kind of say how you feel about what I think it may be. But man, I can't lie, to a degree, it almost feels like he's doing a little bit of a tryout for other teams. I'm sure at this point, John is probably tired, whether he takes much thought or consideration into him. If I was him, I know I'd be tired of these every single year trade rumors around him. There's no way in hell he doesn't see any of them. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm probably being a little facetious there. I understand, but part of it, man, it's one of those where feels like maybe he's just like, hey, other teams, I can't ball out, I can't do this. But of course, in probably all reality, it's John Collins is an incredible guy. So I know it's just because he wants to, play well for the Hawks and do well for the Hawks. But there is a little part of me that's like, oh man, it kind of almost feels like you're trying out for other teams. Because at this point, man, if John Collins does get traded, I'm not one of those that wants to see him go. And and he's not even my favorite player on the team, but I do love John Collins, right? So point being is that if he did go somewhere else, it'd be just like Kevin Huerter, it'd be just like DeLon Wright. I'd be happy for him. I'd hope he go into a good situation. So But yeah, I'll say, man, he's playing great, but I say it with a smile because it's not very serious. But I feel like he might be trying out a little bit for other teams.
Yeah, maybe. I genuinely like JC despite of my harsh criticism around his play sometimes, just because I know some games he's one of the best power forwards in the league, and then other games he just completely falls off. He turns the ball over, still can't dribble, etc. But personally, like just from a man-to-man standpoint, I love everything that he embodies, and anytime he's with the fans, and he loves the city, he loves the team, loves the fans here. So regardless of what happens, I think JC is one of the best guys on the team. But hopefully he can stay on the team, right? I don't think JC is the problem. I think ultimately it is Nate McMillan that is kind of the main culprit of why this team has been struggling. I know I've used JC in some trade machine talks, this and that, because there were games, especially early on the season, where he was just kind of killing the offense, especially with his 3-point efficiency being so abysmal. But like you mentioned, as of late, he definitely has improved his play. 22 points last night against the win in Sacramento. He dropped 25 points against Golden State. He didn't do so hot against the Lakers, only had 7 points, but only took 7 shots. But then he had 21 against Brooklyn, 26 against Indiana. So I'd say arguably that's probably his best 5-game stretch of the season. Like I can confidently say that almost, because yeah, there hasn't been a whole lot of 20+ point games from JC this season, which is a little bit peculiar, but I'm glad he's starting to find his rhythm, right? He's up in the rebounds. His 3-point shot is looking better. He shot 50% last night, 2 out of 4, only hit 1 out of 5 in Golden State, but then he hit 3 out of 6 against Indiana, 1 out of 3 against Brooklyn. So it looks like his 3-point shot is starting to improve slowly. Maybe he's done something differently with his finger. And obviously he's getting more touches, right? DeJounte Murray had a big quote after last night's game. It was Lauren Jabbar, I believe, who was, asking JC a question like, hey, what's gotten into you? Back-to-back games with 20+ points, double-digit rebounds. And DeJounte interrupted the question midway through and basically said he's got to get more touches and get to, we got to give him the ball more. So, yeah, that was pretty telling. And, obviously with Clint Capella not being in the lineup for the past, oh God, I don't even know how many games we've missed him now, for the last like 7-8 games in a row. Obviously has helped JC. He's the primary rebounder, so that's why his rebounding numbers have looked better as of late. He's getting more looks, and he's kind of being used as that primary kind of rim runner now. So, all that definitely contributes, and it kind of backs the whole theory of what a lot of fans have been saying is, you got to have, you can't have both Clint Capella and JC on the court at the same time, because JC's primary specialty and his best ability is rim running and finishing in the paint. It's not to be used as a spot up 3-point shooter and space the floor and let Clint Capella eat up all the paint points. And in years past, that's been able to work because JC has been a very reliable 3-point shooter. But this season it just hasn't been working, and so now you're seeing some of those redundancies. But Clint Capella obviously hasn't been playing in the last games, and JC's been the main beneficiary of that. So all in all, I'm glad what I'm seeing from him. And he's obviously been playing great defensively, back 2 blocks in a row, back-to-back games, racking up some steals as well. So, I'm happy for JC. Hopefully he keeps balling out. But it would be naive of us to say that, this isn't a potential, like you mentioned, potential tryout for other teams because of all the rumors around JC, and with Landry Fields now being the new general manager, we could certainly see a scenario where JC does get dealt by the deadline. So regardless of what happens, I'm just glad he's playing well, and we came out with a W last night.
Oh yeah, and I certainly don't hope this happens, but if it is that it's a little bit of a tryout, the better he plays, that probably just means a better of a return haul that we get. So hey man, it's a win-win no matter what the situation is. So I agree though, like you said, John Collins is definitely one of the better men on the team, and it's one of those where I've always been a huge fan of him. My girlfriend's favorite player is John Collins, so I don't want to see him go anywhere. I do want that to be pretty clear, But at the end of the day, man, it's one of those where, if it happens, it happens, because at this point, I think most Hawk fans, you can tell by how many people are going at each other on Twitter. We're none of us are happy, man, and when that happens, changes more than often have to be made. So, but yeah, man, we'll wrap up JC. We'll move on to our last topic of the episode, and that is going to be the All-Star voting, because that's actually something that came out today. The fan result numbers, some of them pretty shocking to me. Before we get into Trae Young and his numbers, I will say this: I thought it was pretty shocking that Luka didn't have the most votes. I know LeBron and Kevin Durant have been the face of the league for a decade now. Obviously, LeBron even longer than that. But Luka, man, I just thought with how well he's playing this year that he would have got the #1 vote getter. So I thought that was a little shocking. But hey, man, those are the two kings of the league. So it's wasn't shocking either to see them up there. But Trae Young being 5th in guards in voting, I personally think it's unfair, man, because he is clearly there because of the Hawks record. All the guys ahead of him, they do have better records as teams, but none of them have better stats. None of them do. So it's just one of those where I think All-Star voting, Trae has proved it in the past. Actually, other players have as well. This isn't a team success kind of thing in my mind. It is an individual accolade, and I do think Trae deserves to be an All-Star starter again. Whether the Hawks are 18-20, 20-18, or 25-15, whatever it is, I was looking at the numbers before we got on. Trae is, pull this up real quick. Trae is 9th in points and 2nd in assists, and the only other person that's top 10 in points with him is Jaylen Brown and Donovan Mitchell. All those other guys in assists are 45th or lower. I mean, I'm just saying, man, these are, I don't know. I feel like I could go off forever about this, but to me, it's a little crazy that Trae got 5th in the fan voting. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily, that he won't end up being a starter. I know that the fan voting isn't the only determinant of it, but it's wild, man. I think, like I just said, if the Hawks are 25-15, not only do I think Trae Young is easily an all-star starter, I think he's easily also in the MVP conversation. So that's also where some of my frustration towards Nate McMillan comes. Not to bring Nate back into it, but it is like, man, I feel like you're kind of letting our superstar player not really, shine to his fullest potential. So we'll see what happens. But I will die on that hill for this season that Trae Young does deserve to be an all-star starter again.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because there's so many players that have been phenomenal this season, and if we're speaking objectively, because of the efficiency, and Trae, out of all the guys that you listed, has significantly worse field goal percentages, 3-point percentages, etc. The turnovers have been a lot worse. So if you're looking at it strictly just from like a points per game standpoint, I would totally get it. But just to play kind of devil's advocate and be a little objective here, I could see why some people would make a case for someone like a Donovan Mitchell, because I mean he's been absolutely just balling out of his mind, and someone like a Jaylen Brown, same with Jaylen, he's been hooping, and you know how fans get, right? And Trae is obviously one of the most hated players in the league, and it's going to be tough for him to make an all-star starter again. I hope it happens, just because Trae's our guy. He's our superstar. He is, he's been the face of the franchise for the last 4 years. And we need someone like him representing the team in the city. So I hope he makes an all-star team. But, it seems like realistically, it's going to be on one of those reserve roles, unfortunately. But, I agree. Even though the efficiency is down, he's still top 10 in points. But no other point guard in the East, at least, has nearly as many as assists. The dude is averaging damn near 10 assists per game. It's his career best 9.9 assists per game that he's averaging as of what is today, January 5th, 2023. So he's basically giving you 28 and 10. I think his efficiency will improve, but like you said, I don't think an all-star like starting position or even a reserve should have any relevance to team success. It should be straight about individual talent, because at the end of the day, this is an all-star game, right? You want to see the best players, the flashiest players at the all-star game performing, not like, you know, a really good role player that just happens to be on, you know, a first or second seed right now. It's silly. And I would even argue, you know, we've been beneficiaries of that. You know, that year the Hawks won 60 games, we had 4 all-stars at that all-star game, which, you know, I love you, Kyle Korver, but there's no way in hell that Kyle Korver ever should have been an all-star that year. And same with Jeff Teague. So I get it. Team success certainly does have a lot of play in that, which is unfortunate. But hopefully our guy Trey can do it. And you know, for all you listeners out there, if you haven't voted, please do so. You know, I've done my votes multiple times, and it's sad because I was hoping we'd have not only 1, but 2 all-stars at least represented in the all-star game, whether it was a starter or a reserve. But no other Hawks player was even in the top 10 or 12 in all-star voting at their respective position. No DeJounte, no Dre, no JC, no Clint Capella. So that's a little bit unfortunate. But hey, I mean, when you're 18 and 20, you're not going to get a whole lot of love. And, you know, I think our guys would even agree, like, hey, we got to perform better. We got to play better and start racking up these W's, because at the end of the day, all this league is about winning games. You know, it doesn't matter if you rack up L's, you got to win. And that's the bottom line. So it's unfortunate, but hopefully at least our guy Trey can make it. He got snubbed 2 years ago, unfortunately. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. But regardless of if he does make it or if he doesn't, I just want us to win, baby. Just win games. And you know, if no Hawks player makes an all-star team, but we make it to another ECF or finals, I would gladly trade that. Much like 2020 when we had 0 all-stars, and that was the year that Trey actually got snubbed. He went on a tear in the playoffs, and of course, we were 2 games away from a final. So I'll gladly take, you know, any version of that over a meaningless all-star game appearance.
Hey, if it gives him a chip on his shoulder, man, I'll take it, man. I'll take it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You know, maybe without that all-star appearance this year, you know, that's just going to motivate him to play harder, and he needs to remind these kids, you know, who Trae Young is, who Ice Young is, and we'll see what happens. But you know, Trae has kind of been on a roller coaster this season. He started the season really slow, and then there was a few games recently where he looked phenomenal, just like the old Trey again, and then back down. So hopefully we get a more consistent Trey and kind of the old Ice Trey back in 2023, because we're going to need it if we want to catch up in these rankings.
Oh yeah. And you know, before we wrap up, I did think about the efficiency. Trey is definitely having his worst year efficiency wise of probably his entire career, and hopefully his entire career. I hope he doesn't have a worse one than this one. But you know, man, growing up being a Kobe fan, I guess I'm just not afraid of guys, you know, chucking up as many shots as they need to get those points, man. You know, so I hope the efficiency improves, but at the end of the day, man, I'll take my guy over the other 4 ahead of him. So, but yeah, we'll wrap it up on that, man. It hasn't been easy selling for the Hawks here recently. Hopefully that improves, but our schedule here soon, I don't know if it will, man. We'll see what happens. But you know, I can say one thing for certain: we'll still be here. HawksFanTV will still be bringing that content. We'll still be recording podcasts, doing spaces, writing articles. We'll still be doing our thing. I know you guys will still be listening, and we appreciate that tremendously. So yeah, man, we'll wrap it up on there, guys. Have a great night, guys. As always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks. Thank you all for listening.
He's done it again. They cannot stop.